It was kind of a ballsy move for him to put that down in the first place, but unfortunately his little gamble did not pay off. Looks like both guys are still macroing up like crazy. Fantasy still getting a ton of SCV saturation, and he's repairing his units. Oh man, this is when you can tell a great Terran player from just a good Terran player. When it's 15 minutes into the game and they're still repairing units. That is crazy, because every unit counts in a mirror matchup. Takes a good Terran to know that, though. It looks like Fantasy is loading up more dropships. He might try to drop that 6 o'clock or maybe the new 8 o'clock that Canata is building here very soon. But we're going to find out soon enough. Canata is building bases, all kinds of bases, so Canata might actually have the economic advantage here if he can protect all of these bases from the drops from Fantasy. It's going to be difficult because Fantasy, he's committing to a pretty large army. Both guys are still committing to a lot of dropships here. Fantasy's still in the middle with those dropships, though, so he's not really committing to dropping on any of the bases right now. But he has more dropships than Canata, so if he wants to drop here, Kanata's probably not going to be able to defend it. Canata building, well, Fantasy building, they're both building a lot of turrets around here to fend off the drops and make sure the dropship count stays low, because if dropships become too high for either player, like it seems to be becoming for Fantasy here, it's going to spell doom for the other player. This map is very, very drop happy. With all the minerals blocking everything, you kind of have to go for dropships. There's a Kanata's poor engineering bay going to burn down here soon. But yeah, Fantasy's still macroing up here. He's still getting a very large army from all of his factories, and I don't think that Canata is committing to a large factory count right now. I think he committed most of his minerals to building bases all over the place. But he does have Goliaths. Canata can turn this game completely into his favor with those Goliaths. If he catches the dropships, if Fantasy happens to fly over those Goliaths, this is going to look very bad for Fantasy. Fantasy doesn't have nearly that amount of Goliaths. I'm not sure if Fantasy has any Goliaths right now, actually. He might have some, just in case of a Wraith or something. Fantasy trying to scan here and take out the siege tanks. He actually takes out one tank there, dropping a few of his troops from those dropships. But Canata has quite a big army of his own here from those dropships that he has. And he has a bunch of Goliaths, and that's going to keep Fantasy from dropping too close to the siege tanks. So it's a pretty smart play from Canata. But I think he is kind of macroed out right now. He's trying to kick in his new bases. He's actually building another base, and inside, oh man, dropping all over the place. Canata is going to try to end it here. He's dropping all of his troops, but he might be dropped on by Fantasy. Fantasy dropping his troops just within siege range here. Very smart, not going over the... Oh, I was going to say not going over the Goliaths, but he did lose one of those dropships to the Goliaths. I'm not sure how many troops he had in those dropships. Maybe not any, but man, that could be a heavy loss if he had a couple of tanks in there as well. He has some troops at his front of his natural expansion, so he's probably going to have to unsiege and bring those up here soon enough, drop on top of Kanata's siege tanks, and then move in for a kind of a pincer attack with siege tanks of his own. And I think that's what he's trying to do here. It's very hard to sneak up on a siege tank, though, since the range is so large. Even if you have siege tanks of your own, it takes time to siege. So Fantasy is probably going to do a drop here to get rid of this. But Canata, he has bases all over the place. Fantasy took that 9 o'clock, finally, taking away the hidden base from Canata there. But Canata is completely on the southern side of this map. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bases that I can count. He might be trying to take another inside mineral here soon. But taking that many bases means he's going to be behind in military count, at least for a little while. Once he builds more factories here, he's definitely not going to be behind in military count. He's going to be able to keep up with Fantasy here. But his entire force is being whittled down here in the middle of the map. Fantasy is slowly building up his tank count. And once Fantasy gets a very large number of tanks, you do not want to be on the receiving end of that tank line. Fantasy is excellent tank micro. Going to take out the barracks here again, and he has quite a few dropships, so we're probably going to see that drop on top of Kanata's forces here. At least if he takes out all of the Goliaths here. There is the drop on top of all the siege tanks, taking out everything with ease. So look at this army from Fantasy just grinding down the map here, going in with unsieged tanks, just pushing forward, attack moving into all of these tanks. But it looks like Fantasy decides to back off, actually. Surprisingly enough. Oh, I guess he wants to drop. He wants to drop on top of this, or maybe go for a base for a harassment. But this is a very large number of tanks in the middle for Fantasy, and Fantasy's going to drop here. He has his base right next to Canata, so he definitely knows about that. I'm not sure if he's going to use these for harassment or not. He's going in with his dropships, and he has a lot of dropships full of troops. So there's no telling what he's going to do. He's going to drop on more troops from Canata. Both guys using the dropships very effectively, but Fantasy surrounding everything here. A huge amount of forces. GG. But yes, Fantasy moving through with ease, with excellent Terran versus Terran play there. Excellent dropship play. Very scary play from him. And we will soon see who will be his competitor in the semifinals. This has been Nuke. I'm moving on to Zero versus Zedong.